One of the things you and Bob Hawke appeared here 2 years ago. It was a great address by the two of you. Interesting to see the way old colleagues were foes in a way became old colleagues. We don't see a lot of that in Parliament today. One of the things that Bob Hawke said at the time, and I think you effectively concurred, was that parliaments are held in a degree of, he said, if not contempt, then certainly disdain today. We've seen the recent events in New South Wales, obviously the Sam Dastyari issue in terms of political donations from the Chinese. We've seen, or support from the Chinese. We've seen obviously the broader donations issue, which is, if you like, ensnared both sides of politics, particularly the Liberals. We've seen this morning the comments by Angus Taylor, for instance, about the Liberal Party in New South Wales. How do you feel about the current situation, particularly, and how do we deal with this whole donations issue?
Well, there are two parts of that question. Can I just say, in relation to donations, which is in a sense separate from the Dastyari, I mean, Dastyari is about getting money from a company to settle a private obligation. That's got nothing to do with political donations. But out of that has spun this issue. Look, my view on political donations is different from a lot of the stuff I've read in the press this morning. I don't believe that if a company is carrying on a lawful activity, it should be prohibited from making a political donation. I don't think every developer in this country is a crook, any more than I believe that people who aren't developers are all virtuous. So I don't agree with that. And I certainly don't agree with the suggestions that we should further limit the amount that people contribute or companies contribute, because I think fundamentally it's an attack on freedom of political activity and expression. If you limit donations to a small amount per head, that will inevitably result in massive increases in public funding. And political parties cannot run campaigns on nothing. I know enough about the cost of campaigns to realise that, and I'm sure any people present in this gathering who are close to the Labor Party will understand the same thing. And be careful what you wish for when you look to the idea of having more public funding. More public funding will inevitably result in some government in the future saying, well, we're going to give this public funding provided you do this and this and this. Now, Ireland is being quoted at the moment as an example of a country that should be followed in relation to another issue which I won't go into, but Ireland has a public funding law that enables the public funding to be reduced if gender equality targets are not met in relation to members of parliament and candidates. Now, some people may think that's good, some might think it's bad. Leave that aside. But the fact that you can have that in the law is undeniably bad, because if you can do that, why can't you do something else in relation to something else? And I mean, having spent all of my life in a political party fighting socialism and nationalisation, it passes strange to me that people should embrace the idea of completely socialising the operation of political parties by increasing the amount of public funding, because that's the result. Now, there's a caveat to all of that, and the caveat is that if you make a donation, if anybody makes a donation, it's got to be disclosed in a more timely fashion. You know, you can debate as to whether it's a month or 2 months or whatever, but in a more timely fashion. I think arguments that it's not timely enough are understandable. And the other issue, of course, is the third parties. I read in one of the papers this morning, I think it was the Sydney Morning Herald, they listed all the rules they would want, and one of their rules was, well, when it came to third parties, they'd have to be subject to the same caps and everything, unless, of course, they weren't advocating a political party or an individual candidate. Well, you could drive a horse and cart through that. All you have to do is run a campaign against something that is undeniably connected with one of the political parties. And they're my views on public funding. Now, what was the other part of the question?
Well, we'll move on, I think.
Yeah.